I never imagined I would be standing alone in the living room of our Seattle home, staring at Michael's favorite leather jacket hanging on the coat rack, knowing he would never wear it again. Knowing that today I would bury the man who was my partner, my best friend, my entire life. And yet the pain in my chest was nothing compared to the shock that came when I checked my phone this morning to see messages from our own children. The 3 lives Michael and I nurtured and raised. The same ones he adored more than anything, telling me they wouldn't be coming to his funeral. Emily with a short text saying she had a work emergency, though I knew she simply wanted to avoid facing the truth. Lily with a voice note in her typical detached tone explaining she couldn't handle something so sad. And Adam, my youngest, sending a brief "I'll try" before going silent. And that try felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest because I knew, just like that, they had chosen to abandon their father on the day he left this world. The man who had worked endlessly to give them a good life, who stayed up countless nights helping them with school projects, who drove hours to attend Emily's graduation and Lily's recitals, who sacrificed his own comfort and dreams for their happiness. And now they were gone, refusing to show him even the last bit of respect. And I felt the house shrink around me, the walls pressing in as grief and disbelief clawed at my throat. And I sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, holding his old watch in my hands. The one he never removed except when he slept. Imagining his gentle laugh and calm reassurance. Telling me to breathe. Telling me the kids would come around. Even in his final moments hoping they would see how much he loved them. And I whispered to the empty room, "They're not coming." Feeling the truth of it settle into my bones like ice, and when I dressed for the funeral, I wore his simple black suit jacket over a plain dress. Something we had never planned for a day like this, but today there was no choice. Only the suffocating silence of a house where his presence lingered but his voice did not. And I remembered the first time he held Emily in his arms. His trembling joy. The promises he made to always protect her. Teaching Lily to ride her bike, falling over but laughing anyway. Helping Adam finish his school assignments late at night despite being exhausted. All the little sacrifices he made so effortlessly. And now the children who were supposed to cherish those moments had turned their backs on him, and the funeral hall felt surreal. The chairs set perfectly, the flowers arranged carefully. And every neighbor, every friend, every colleague who came up to offer their condolences asked politely but pointedly, "Where are the kids?" And I forced a calm smile and said they were on their way. Even as I knew the truth, that not one of them would walk through the door. That Michael would not get to see the faces of the ones he loved most one last time. And as the priest spoke about his patience, his kindness, the way he always thought of others before himself, the empty chairs where my children should have been mocked me silently. The murmurs of guests full of confusion and sympathy pressing against my heart. And after the service when everyone had gone, I found myself kneeling beside his grave, whispering, "If they only knew how much you loved them," feeling both the weight of loss and the betrayal at once. And it was then that my phone buzzed, a small light in the dark. And I prayed it would be one of them reaching out to say they realized their mistake. But it was just a generic notification, and the disappointment crushed me further. And driving home, the streets blurred through my tears. I imagined the life we had shared. The dinners, the laughter, the struggles, the triumphs. All ending with the children who had benefited most of all standing on the sidelines. And when I walked into our home, everything felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Too empty without him. His slippers by the door. His mug on the counter. His jacket hanging neatly. And I felt my body shake from exhaustion and heartbreak and fury all at once. And finally, as night fell and I sat on the couch staring at the darkness outside the window, my phone buzzed again. A simple text from Adam saying, "Mom, we need to talk." And in that instant I felt something I hadn't felt in days, a flicker of hope. Because maybe he had finally realized the truth about the lies that had poisoned his mind. Maybe he wanted to set things right. Maybe there was a chance to uncover the real reason my children had abandoned their father. Maybe the storm that had been quietly brewing for months was finally beginning to break. And I whispered into the darkness, "Okay, Adam, I'm listening." Not knowing that this one conversation would unravel a web of deception. Betrayal and manipulation spun by someone who had always envied Michael. Someone who had wanted to control our family from the shadows. Someone named Harris Bennett, his old business partner, whose greed and resentment had poisoned the minds of the children he loved most. And I knew in that moment that grief alone would not be enough, that the truth must come out. And justice must be done, not just for Michael, but for the children who deserved to see their father for who he truly was before it was too late. When Adam arrived at the house that evening, I could see immediately how heavy the weight of the funeral and the lies had fallen on him. His shoulders slumped, his eyes red from crying. And for a moment I saw not the man he had grown into, but the little boy who used to cling to Michael's hand when he was scared. And I felt a mixture of grief and anger that I could hardly contain. Because my children had been poisoned by someone who had always envied my husband. Someone named Harris Bennett, his old business partner, who had once lost a major deal and held a grudge for years. And now Harris had managed to twist Emily and Lily against their father, to make Adam hesitate even to come to the funeral. And as Adam sat down on the couch, I motioned for him to take a deep breath, telling him softly that it was okay. That he could tell me everything, and his voice shook as he began, saying, "Mom, I didn't know who to believe." Harris came to Emily first. He showed her documents. Screenshots, fake emails, made it seem like Dad had hidden money from us. That he had manipulated us all. And she believed him because she trusted him. And then Lily followed. And they both convinced me that maybe Dad wasn't the man we thought he was. And the words hit me like a punch, like the betrayal had reached through the walls and into my chest. And I swallowed hard, holding my trembling hands together. Whispering, "Adam, look at me. Your father never lied to you. He never hid anything from any of you. He gave you everything he could. He worked tirelessly for your happiness, for your security, for your future." And Adam's eyes filled with tears as he shook his head, saying I thought I was doing the right thing by listening to them, by trusting what Harris told us. And my heart ached, because I knew the poison had been so carefully applied that even my children could not see the truth. And I reached out, placing my hand gently over his, telling him that now it was time to see the truth. To understand that Harris's words were lies, twisted to create doubt and division. And Adam looked up at me, a flicker of hope in his eyes, but still clouded with guilt, and he whispered, "Mom, I don't know how to fix it." And I told him gently, "The truth is the first step. You have to know the real story about your father and Harris Bennett." And he nodded slowly, finally allowing himself to be vulnerable. And he began to recount everything Harris had told him. Every fabricated document, every false accusation, every manipulation designed to make them see their father as controlling, unfair, or selfish. And I listened silently, my heart heavy but my mind sharp, piecing together how Harris had spent months, maybe years, planning this, watching our family, learning their weaknesses, and slowly using those to convince Emily, Lily, and even Adam that their father, the man they loved, was not who he seemed. And when Adam paused, gasping from the burden of what he had been carrying, I told him calmly, "We will fix this. We will show them who Michael really was." And Adam's voice broke as he whispered, "Mom, I feel like I failed him," and I held his hand tighter, telling him no. The failure is not yours. The failure is Harris Bennett's. The failure is the lies, the manipulation, the poison. And together we will undo it. Together we will honor your father the way he deserves. And Adam nodded slowly, wiping his tears, taking a shaky breath. And then I explained to him that the first step would be understanding exactly what Harris wanted. That the lies were never about the kids. Never about the funeral. Never about their resentment. It was always about control, about property, about money. About proving he could manipulate the family of the man he envied. And as I said this, Adam's eyes widened in realization. Mom, he wanted the house, the savings, Dad's business contracts, everything Dad built, and I nodded, explaining that Harris had been waiting for the perfect moment to make his move. And that now, with Michael gone and the children temporarily against him, he thought he could take everything. And Adam looked at me, horror in his eyes, saying, "Mom, what can we do?" And I felt a fierce surge of protective instinct, telling him first, we gather evidence. We understand every lie he told, we expose him. And we bring our family back together. And Adam nodded slowly, saying he would do anything. That he couldn't stand feeling like he abandoned his father. And I told him we start with honesty, talking to Emily and Lily. Letting them know what really happened, letting them see the documents and messages for what they were. Forgeries, fabrications, and he hesitated, whispering, "I don't know if they will listen," and I said calmly, "They will. Because the truth has a way of breaking through lies." And he took a shaky breath, ready to do the hardest thing of his life. Facing his sisters and telling them that everything they believed had been manipulated. And I could see the gears turning in his mind as he realized how Harris had twisted emotions. How he had exploited their trust. How he had used them as pawns. And I felt both pride and sorrow at the same time. Because the man they had wronged in life, their father, would have been devastated, but he would have wanted us to act. To fight back not with anger but with truth. With planning, with courage, and I told Adam we cannot rush this. We need a plan, we need patience, we need to understand Harris's moves. And he nodded, wiping the last of his tears. Saying he was ready. And I felt the first spark of hope since Michael passed. That maybe the family could survive this betrayal. That maybe justice could be done. That the children could see the truth before any more damage was done. And I whispered quietly, almost to myself, almost to Michael, "We will make this right." And the next morning, I began tracing every contact Harris had with my children. Every message, every email, every meeting. Until I had a clear map of his manipulations. And Adam helped me, recounting every detail he remembered. Every time Harris inserted himself into our lives under the guise of concern. Every false story, every insinuation, and together we started documenting. Creating a timeline, preparing to reveal the truth. And Emily and Lily finally agreed to meet with us reluctantly. Because Adam had reached out to them and told them we needed to talk. And when they arrived, I saw the uncertainty on their faces. The guilt, the confusion, the questions swirling in their eyes. And I took a deep breath, looking at them. Telling them the truth about Harris, about the lies. About the documents, about the messages. About how their father loved them unconditionally. And I watched as the tension in the room shifted slightly. Their defenses softening as they began to grasp that the reality they had believed had been constructed by someone who hated our family. Someone who wanted to take everything. Someone named Harris Bennett. And as they listened, tears forming in their eyes, I realized that even though the betrayal had hurt deeply, even though Michael would never see this moment, the family could begin to heal, the truth could finally shine through. And I whispered to myself that Michael's legacy, his love, his integrity, would not be stolen. And we would make sure Harris Bennett never had the chance to hurt us again. Because we would fight together, as a family, as he would have wanted. And the first steps of that fight began in that small living room in Seattle, Washington, with Adam, Emily, Lily, and me. Confronting the lies, facing the betrayal, and reclaiming the truth of the man we loved more than anything, their father, Michael. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since Michael passed. A fire in my chest that told me grief alone would not win this fight. That the children needed to see the truth and Harris Bennett needed to be stopped. And as I poured coffee into my favorite mug, I thought about the way Harris had inserted himself into our family. First subtly, pretending to be concerned, giving advice that seemed innocent. Planting doubts like seeds that would grow quietly over months until they were poisonous. And I remembered Adam's recounting of every message. Every email, every call where Harris had twisted words. Making our children think their father had hidden things from them. Making Emily believe that Dad had kept financial secrets. Making Lily feel controlled and manipulated. And Adam himself, my youngest, had been caught in the middle. Torn between loyalty and the lies he was fed. And I felt the full weight of betrayal pressing down on my shoulders because the man who had shared my life for 25 years, who had given everything to our family, was being slandered even in death by someone who had never cared about us. Only his own envy, and I knew that the first step was to gather undeniable proof. To map out every manipulation Harris had done. To create a timeline so clear that even my children could not deny what had happened. And I spent hours on the computer reviewing every email and document I could access, noting dates, cross-referencing times, and calling banks and colleagues under the guise of routine inquiries to confirm what was real and what had been fabricated. And as I worked, I felt Adam hovering nearby, eager to help. Remorseful but willing to do what it took to restore the memory of his father. And by the afternoon, we had enough evidence to confront Harris's lies head-on. But I knew the real challenge would be bringing Emily and Lily to a place where they could listen without anger or defensiveness. So I called them separately, asking them to meet at the house, emphasizing that it was important for the family to come together and talk. And when Emily arrived first, I could see the tension in her body, the hesitation in her eyes, and I asked her calmly to sit, to put away the anger for a moment. And she scoffed slightly but complied, and I began slowly, recounting Harris's history with Michael, his resentment over past business deals, the way he had envied Michael's success, how he had used that envy to infiltrate our family life. And I showed her the emails, the messages, the fabricated documents, pointing out inconsistencies and forgeries. And I could see her face shift slowly from defensiveness to confusion. The carefully constructed story Harris had fed her unraveling piece by piece, and I told her gently, "Emily, your father never hid anything from you, never manipulated you, never withheld anything. He worked for you, for your happiness, for your future." And as she sat in silence, tears forming, I could feel the first cracks in the wall Harris had built between us and our children. And then Lily arrived, looking guarded but curious. And I repeated the same process, walking her through the evidence, the timeline, the lies, emphasizing that Harris had orchestrated all of it to turn the family against Michael after he passed so he could gain control of the property, the house, the savings. And I watched as her eyes widened, as disbelief replaced her anger. And finally, I turned to both of them and Adam, who was quietly observing, and I said, "Now you know the truth. Now you know how your father loved you. How Harris wanted to destroy that love," and I could see a mixture of relief, sorrow, and guilt in their expressions. And I felt my own eyes sting as I realized that the children I thought I had lost were coming back. Coming back to the truth, coming back to their father in spirit, if not in life. And Adam spoke first, his voice trembling, saying, "Mom, I can't believe we let him manipulate us like that." And Emily and Lily nodded, tears streaming down their faces. And I said softly, "It wasn't your fault. It was Harris's plan, his deceit, his envy. And together we will make sure he doesn't hurt anyone else." And as I spoke those words, I felt a renewed sense of strength. Because this was no longer just about mourning Michael. It was about protecting his legacy, defending his memory, and reclaiming the life he built for us. And we began to plan carefully, discussing how we would confront Harris, what evidence we would show him, how we would make it clear that the children knew the truth, that his manipulation had failed, and that our family was stronger than his deceit. And as evening fell, the four of us sat together, exhausted but united, the air filled with a new energy, a sense of determination, and I knew that Michael would have been proud, that he would have wanted us to act, to fight back with intelligence, patience, and courage. And we devised a plan to gather all of Harris's communications with the children, to have clear documentation of his lies, and to meet with him in a controlled environment where the truth would be undeniable. And as I outlined the strategy, I could see Adam's shoulders relax slightly, Emily's expression soften, Lily's eyes glisten with tears. And I felt the first spark of hope that our family could heal, that the damage could be repaired, and that Harris Bennett would finally be exposed for the man he really was. And I whispered quietly to myself, and almost to Michael, "We will make this right. We will honor your memory. We will reclaim our family. And the storm that Harris tried to bring into our lives will end now because the truth has power." and the four of us together will ensure it prevails. And as night fell over Seattle, I looked at my children and realized that the fight was just beginning. That the confrontation with Harris would be difficult and tense. But that we had each other, and the strength of Michael's love. And that would guide us through the deception, the anger and the betrayal, and by the time the house grew quiet, the four of us sitting in the dim glow of the living room lamps, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, a sense of unity, a flicker of courage, a promise that the family Michael loved so fiercely would survive, that his children would see the truth, and that Harris Bennett's shadow would no longer darken our lives. And as I drifted into a restless sleep, I whispered once more, "We will fight. We will expose him. We will restore what he tried to steal, and nothing will stand in our way." The morning we decided to confront Harris Bennett, I felt a tension in the house that I hadn't felt since Michael passed. A mixture of fear and determination, because we knew he would never admit his lies willingly, never apologize, never show remorse, and yet we had something he could not control. Something he had underestimated: the truth, the evidence. The bond that Michael had built between his children and me. And as Adam, Emily, Lily, and I piled into the car to drive to Harris's office, I could see the anxiety written on all our faces. The way Emily's hands fidgeted with her coffee cup. The way Lily kept checking her phone as if she expected Harris to text some excuse. And Adam kept glancing at the rearview mirror, silently practicing the words he might say. And I reminded them gently, "Stay calm, stay focused, speak the truth. Do not let him manipulate you." And the drive felt longer than usual. Every stoplight and turn stretching the tension. Until we finally arrived, a modern office building in downtown Seattle. Glass and steel reflecting the gray sky, and we walked in together. Four people united in grief, in anger, in love. And when the receptionist asked who we were here to see, I said clearly Harris Bennett. And we were escorted to his office, the room large, decorated with expensive furniture and framed degrees. And there he was, sitting behind a massive desk, looking surprised but quickly masking it with a smug smile. And he said, "Sarah, what a surprise," and I felt a chill. Because the calm confidence in his voice was the same one that had been used to deceive my children, to twist their minds against their father. And I replied steadily, "Harris, we need to talk about what you've been doing." And his eyes narrowed slightly, pretending not to know what I meant. And I leaned forward, Adam, Emily, Lily behind me, and I said, "Do not play games, we know everything. We know how you manipulated them, we know the lies. The fake documents, the messages, the stories you told to turn them against Michael." And for a moment I saw a flicker of unease cross his face, quickly replaced by that false confidence he always used. And he laughed softly, saying, "Oh, come on, Sarah. You're overreacting." And I felt my hands clench, but I stayed calm. "Because we have proof," I said, pointing to a folder I had brought with us, containing emails, screenshots, and copies of forged documents, all organized chronologically. And his smile faltered just slightly, and I continued, "These are the lies you fed Emily and Lily. These are the manipulations you performed on Adam. These are the attempts to destroy my husband's reputation after he passed, and now you have been exposed." And I saw his posture shift, a subtle tightening, a slight lean forward in his chair, and I said, "You underestimated the love Michael built in this family. You underestimated the bond he shared with his children. And now your games are over." And Emily stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. "Harris, how could you do this? How could you lie to us about our father?" And Harris opened his mouth, trying to deflect, but Lily cut him off, showing the messages on her phone. The fabricated emails, the timelines we had created, every piece of evidence laid out in front of him. And I watched as his expression shifted from smug to defensive, realizing that the deception he had relied upon for months could no longer stand. And Adam spoke, his voice strong. "I trusted you, Harris. And you lied to us, manipulated us, and almost destroyed our family." And Harris leaned back, trying to regain control. saying it wasn't that simple, that he was trying to help. But Emily shook her head. No, you were trying to control. To manipulate. And I added firmly, you wanted to take my husband's house, his savings, his legacy. But the only thing you succeeded in was underestimating us. And now the children know the truth. And Harris's face was pale, his jaw tight. And I could see the fear of exposure. The realization that everything he had plotted was unraveling. And I said, you may have thought you could poison our family from the shadows. But love, truth, and loyalty cannot be broken by greed. Cannot be shattered by lies. And he remained silent, finally. Almost inaudibly saying, I didn't think. And I interrupted, no, you didn't think we would fight back. You didn't think the children would see through your games. You didn't think the family Michael loved would survive. And Emily, Lily, and Adam all stepped closer, showing a united front, and I told them to continue, to speak for themselves. And Adam said, we are not afraid of you. Harris, your lies end here. And Lily said, our father was a better man than you will ever be. And Emily added, and we will honor him, together. And I could feel Harris shrinking, the confidence he always wielded draining from him, replaced with shame and fear. And I said calmly, you will never manipulate our family again. You will never try to steal from Michael's children, and if you attempt to, we will expose you further, legally, publicly, emotionally, in every way. And he swallowed hard, nodding silently, defeated, and I knew that in that moment, justice had been served not by anger, not by retaliation, but by truth and courage. And as we left the office, walking together back to the car, I felt the bond between us stronger than ever. The love for Michael's memory unshakable, the family restored. And I whispered quietly to Adam, Emily, and Lily, this is the beginning of healing, the children's trust rebuilt, the truth acknowledged, the deception broken. And as we drove home through the gray Seattle streets, I realized that Michael's spirit, his lessons, his kindness, his sacrifices had prevailed. That Harris Bennett's shadow could no longer touch us. And I felt an overwhelming sense of relief and pride. Because the children had seen through the lies, had stood by the truth, and together we would move forward, honoring their father, protecting each other, and ensuring that no one ever again threatened our family with manipulation or betrayal. And as we arrived home, I opened the door and felt the familiar warmth of our house. Michael's presence still lingering, and I knew that while the pain of his loss would never fully leave, the family he loved and nurtured would endure. Stronger, wiser, and united. And in that moment I whispered once more, thank you, Michael, for teaching us love, for giving us strength, for showing us that no shadow can overcome truth. And as night fell over Seattle, our family sat together, healing, planning, and ready to embrace the future without fear, without lies, and without betrayal. The days after confronting Harris Bennett were some of the most intense I had ever lived through. Because while the confrontation was over, the emotional fallout had only begun. And I watched as Adam, Emily, and Lily processed the truth, their grief for Michael now interwoven with guilt, anger, and relief, and I held them close, reminding them that we could not change the past, we could only act in the present. And we were going to rebuild the trust that Harris had tried so desperately to destroy. And it began slowly, with small conversations, with laughter returning in the kitchen, with arguments that were no longer about lies but about everyday life. And I saw their personalities shine again, Adam's quiet determination, Emily's sharp wit, Lily's gentle warmth. And I felt a sense of hope for the first time in weeks. Because we were surviving, because we were together. Because we had honored Michael by facing the truth and refusing to let a greedy, manipulative man destroy our family. And yet, Harris was not gone from our thoughts, because even though he had been exposed, the question remained whether he would try again, whether he would find another way to manipulate or hurt us. And I began documenting everything, legal consultations, conversations, keeping a paper trail so there would be no doubt if he ever attempted to interfere again. And the children helped, diligently, wanting to right the wrongs, wanting to prove to themselves that they could trust in their father's legacy. And one evening, as we gathered in the living room with Seattle's lights twinkling outside the window, Adam spoke first. Mom, I feel like a piece of my father's love was stolen, and Emily added, we let someone convince us he wasn't the man we knew. And Lily said softly, but we see it now, and I nodded, tears in my eyes, and said, yes, you see it now, and that is what matters. That the truth is stronger than any lie. That the bond your father built with you cannot be broken by someone else's envy. And together we began talking about Michael, sharing stories, remembering moments that Harris could never touch. The family trips, the late-night talks, the birthdays, the little things that defined who he was, and I felt him there in the room. Not as a shadow but as a presence, as a guiding force, reminding us that love conquers deception, that patience and courage can undo even the most carefully constructed lies. And I knew it was time to make sure Harris Bennett could never manipulate anyone else again. So we filed legal notices to prevent him from accessing the property, the house, the bank accounts. And I made sure the children understood the importance of protecting the family from now on. Teaching them vigilance without fear. Teaching them love without resentment. And one afternoon, Emily said, Mom, I want to do something for Dad, a way to honor him, and I smiled, saying, yes. What is it? And she said, let's restore the community garden he loved so much. The one in our neighborhood he planted every spring, and I nodded, thinking about how Michael had always cared about more than just our family, about the people around us, and together we cleaned, planted and painted, our hands in the soil, our hearts in the memories. And Lily said, I want to volunteer at the shelter he loved, and Adam said, I want to set up a scholarship in his name for students who are struggling but determined to succeed. And I felt a deep pride, realizing that Michael's influence was not gone, that his love and values would continue through us. And one evening, after the work was done, we sat together in the living room, exhausted but content. And I reflected on how Harris Bennett had almost broken us. How his envy and lies had temporarily turned us against our own family. But that truth, patience, and courage had restored what was most important. And I said quietly, sometimes people will try to manipulate you, to turn you against those you love, to steal what is precious, but never forget. Love and truth are stronger than lies. And the children nodded, tears glistening in their eyes. And Adam whispered, Mom, I'll never doubt again. I'll never let someone like that come between us. And Emily said, me neither. And Lily added, neither will I. And I felt a warmth spread through me because our family had survived betrayal, survived manipulation, survived grief, and come out stronger. And as I looked around at the 3 lives Michael had loved fiercely, I knew that his legacy was secure, that his memory would not be tarnished, and that Harris Bennett's shadow would never fall over us again. And I whispered into the quiet night, thank you, Michael, for teaching us love, for giving us strength, for showing us courage, and for proving that no darkness can overcome the light of truth. And the children and I sat together in silence, the city lights glowing, the house warm and filled with the echoes of laughter and love returning. And I realized that the lesson we had learned, painful as it was, would carry forward, that no lie, no betrayal, no envy could ever destroy what was built on love. And I vowed to carry that lesson with us forever, to protect our family, to honor Michael's memory, and to never let deceit cloud the hearts of the ones we love. And as the night deepened, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't thought possible, knowing that Michael's children, his family, and I had survived the storm, had reclaimed the truth, and would continue to thrive, bound by the love he had given us. And in that moment, I understood fully that while life can bring betrayal, grief, and challenges, courage, truth, and unity are stronger. And our family, though scarred, was whole again, ready to face the future together, stronger, wiser, and filled with love. And I whispered one final time, we are his legacy, we are his truth, and nothing can ever take that from us.